Recently, the Wall Street Journal reported that the federal deficit is actually a lot bigger than it looks, because of the odd way that Joe Biden's handlers hid a fat chunk with their student loan bailout. Now, the deficit was already looking pretty dire, hitting $1.7 trillion for the fiscal year that just ended a few weeks ago. That was up from $1.4 trillion the previous year, so about a 20% jump, which is pretty big for 1 year. Even that number was putting us on track, according to Congress's own bean counters at the CBO, to $45 trillion in debt by 2033, and wait for it, $144 trillion by 2053. Well, it turns out that was an understatement, because of what the Journal calls the odd way Biden counted student loan cancellations. Essentially, when the Supreme Court struck down Biden's loan handout, the $333 billion they were going to give away got counted as a spending cut, which would be like me thinking about buying a Corvette. My wife tells me no, so I brag that I just made $68,000. So that little shell game means the deficit last year wasn't up $300 billion, 1.4 to 1.7. It was actually up $600 billion. That's a 40% spike on the year, taking it to a cool $2 trillion and dramatically accelerating Washington's $144 trillion debt utopia. Now, I mentioned in recent videos that even those numbers are a pipe dream for 3 reasons: debt service, recession, and wars. On debt service, the government is now paying almost twice in interest what it was paying 18 months ago, projecting past $1 trillion per year and rising fast. Meanwhile, every recession hits the deficit hard. People who don't have jobs can't pay tax, and recessions send federal spending soaring as governments hand out fresh trillions. So going by recent recessions, these would bring the annual deficit closer to $4 to $5 trillion. Then, of course, the wars. We seem to be notching one world war per year that, for some reason, American families have to pay for. Just this week, Biden and Yellen gleefully waved off fiscal concerns about paying for 2 wars, saying, why no, we can afford them all, meaning you can afford them all. So toss all that in, and even the $144 trillion is starting to look very optimistic. So what is next? Brought to you by Unchained. What's next is we are in a fiscal death spiral, and our ruling clowns are stomping on the gas. A few weeks ago, I mentioned a fresh $5 trillion plan to hand out global warming money to third world countries. We've got corporate welfare coming out Washington's wazoos, much of it to blow up things overseas. And of course, Joe Biden has now welcomed 7 million illegal immigrants to our welfare industrial complex. All of it with no end in sight. So yes, they will keep looting the treasury. In fact, they are speeding up and will keep going until either they're voted out, which is a remote prospect given both parties are in on the game, or until they break something, whether financial markets or what remains of the US dollar, at which point voters rebel, whoever is counting the votes. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.